Welcome to the very first episode of Media Pass. My name is Wet Nude, and I'm here with my co-host Neon, and this is a little series we're calling the Road to S.I. Now, unfortunately, the original date planned that we all know and love of February for the S.I. has been postponed, and there has been recent confirmation that it will go down in May. So with that being said, we're going to run down through all the teams that made it into the S.I., and we're going to tell you players to look at, the way they got into SI, and explain these teams to you.
Yeah, I mean, first off, we can't talk about Siege, esports, or really anything in general without mentioning TSM, Team Solo Mid. Got the lineup of Geo, Chala, Achieved, Bolo, Merc, and of course, coached by Pojo Man himself. So going all the way back here to the first stage of the US division, TSM came up in second place, right behind Dark Zero. They basically walked through everybody in their groups, beside a single match that they lost to Dark Zero, which was the only match in Stage 1 that they even dropped a map. During Phase 2 of the first stage, they started off slow, but came back and showed everybody exactly what they were made of. They came second overall in their group after starting off by losing to Oxygen Esports 2-1, then rebounding in a solid win against Dark Zero 2-0, where they finally got their revenge against Oxygen in a solid 2-1 win to confirm their second place rank for Phase 1 and a spot at this year's Invitational.
Yeah, going into, Stage 1 for them was absolutely fantastic, although they did fall short in that major. Stage 2 is kind of the same when it's talk about the start. Stage 2 group stages, they end up finishing second place overall, but would not be denied that November major, as they would take down the reigning 2020 SI champs on a LAN at that major, which was at the time extremely impressive. SSG was known for being a LAN team, and TSM came through and just swept them. TSM this season had looked absolutely terrifying. We talk about that roster that we said earlier. Geometrics, one of the most clutch North American players. Chala, the new kid being brought in to replace Pojo Man, that was horribly underrated, underestimated, and has done nothing short of being an absolute star player. You talk about Achieved, who's been one of the most consistent players in NAL from CL into Pro League. And then, of course, you have one of the most mechanically gifted duos of Merc and Bolo.
Yeah, there's so much talent on this team here. As you mentioned, every single person here brings something to the table. And we go back to the previous SI, the most recent, roster change of Chala. Pojo was playing. They moved him to the coaching position. And I know a lot of people said, I don't know if this is a good decision, if this is going to work out well, but it's really, really worked well, as we've seen throughout the entire last year here. And it's been going really well for him.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. You talk about a second place finish at the August major, first place at the November major, and as you're about to see, on the clips rolling, this is the final round of the final map of the NAL 2020 US Division Finals, where they finally got that revenge against DC, and you're going to see, obviously, as we have it rolling, they're going to win this map on Clubhouse 8-6, but Neon, this map didn't look like it was going to go TSM's way at the beginning, did it?
No, it really didn't. Coming into this portion of the clip, they actually started off 2-6 on Clubhouse. So they were down 4 rounds to just tie, and then they had to come back and do another 2 to secure the overtime victory, which they did 6 rounds in a row. Extremely difficult to do for anybody, much less TSM versus Dark Zero, a team known for getting that one more map, for that one more match, closing out the map and being able to move on to the next one. Just couldn't seem to do it. And the squad of TSM was just absolutely rolling over them for those rounds.
Yeah, especially on a map like a Clubhouse that was named Dub House after the meme for Dark Zero when they punished the reigning Clubhouse champions, SSG. And it seemed like that was the map that's become their map. And to just be 6-2 up and just not be able to close out that map, just shows the absolute resilience that TSM have. And it's just been an absolute pleasure to watch them. But we're going to talk about our impact player now, and I think there's one question that everybody asks when we know TSM is going to play.
When does Bolo play?
When does Bolo play? Boulder, Buelow. When does he play? Bolo busted onto this scene about 2 seasons ago with TSM. And at the time, every little mistake he made, every bad game, every bad round was people saying that Bolo is not going to be able to make it into the Pro League and be able to sustain that level of success we saw him in ranked. But he has done nothing short of consistently show that he's willing to learn. He has constantly improved, and he's become one of the most feared fraggers in all of North America.
Yeah, Bolo has been here from the very beginning of the TSM squad. I remember going all the way back to the Raleigh Major 2 years ago now. Everything that he did wrong, as you mentioned, people were criticizing and saying, oh, Bolo's washed, he's saving strats for YouTube. But we've seen him progress as a player, both himself and the entire TSM stack, or the roster changes they made in the individual players. They've all progressed as players, as individuals, and they've gotten better and better and better every single time that we see them. Going from not performing so hot in the Raleigh Major, making it to the Invitational that year, performing exceedingly well, getting themselves all the way up to a fourth place finish, losing to the team that eventually gave SSG the run for their money there, and then going on making this year's Invitational, coming as second at the August Majors, winning the November Majors. They've done phenomenally for themselves.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. TSM has done nothing but start off as the quote-unquote laughing stock from their first season in Pro League to now being one of the most feared teams in any region. And looking at the stats that we see on screen from that US Division Finals, entries not so great, but that KD was absolutely insane. His cost is 74%. And if you look at that headshot percentage, I think we all know when you say just click his forehead, one player comes to mind, and that's Bolo.
Yeah, that's all Bolo seems to be able to do with a 64% headshot percentage. That's about 65% higher than mine in ranked.
You might want to try aiming more at the head, but Bolo's been an absolutely outstanding player. I believe he had at the last SI, I believe he was the only one really rivaling Shaiko's numbers. I believe it was him and Rampy or Fultz that were really keeping up with the god that is Shaiko. And I think that speaks numbers for itself. When you keep up with the person that people arguably consider the most mechanically gifted player to ever touch Siege, and you're on his hind parts for that top fragging position, I think that speaks volumes about you as a player and as a fragger. But let's start talking about a little bit about that last SI. 2020 SI, we're looking at TSM with Pojo. They lose, I think their only losses up until NIP in that loser bracket final was SSG. I think that's the only other team they lost to in the entirety of the SI. They lost them in their group stage. They lost to SSG to get knocked down into the lower bracket. And then, as I mentioned earlier, just fell short of that final rematch in the finals because NIP were just on an absolute tear and could not be stopped.
NIP, I mean, we can't shortchange any of the teams out there. NIP was destroying every single team that they were up against, barely losing out to SSG. But TSM put on a phenomenal show. They were the ones who put NIP in the losers bracket to begin with. And that was such a incredible thing to do against a team like NIP, how they were playing, what they managed to eventually achieve there. TSM popped off, and I don't expect for them to do any worse this year.
Yeah, I think doing any worse would be a disappointment to not only all the fans, but to them themselves. And I think they know this. I think they're prepared for the pressure. I mean, you could see it coming into this NAL. There was already pressure for them to be one of the top two teams, or people would start questioning their ability and their fluke maybe of a run at SI 2020. But obviously, as we know the story, a second place and two first place finishes proves TSM have the ability to take that pressure and not break, not fold under it. And I think that's going to be extremely crucial going into this next SI, should it happen in May, and hopefully it does.
Well, speaking of this SI, what are your predictions for where TSM lands?
I have to say, a lot like you, I think a top four finish has to be the play. I think the meta favors them. I think their play style is very hard. Everyone on that team is a clutch gunner, and they're all smart players. I mean, I really find it hard for them to not place top four, but it has been over a year since we've seen cross region play. And maybe that might trip some teams that you expect to go far out of the gate to where maybe they don't make as far as we expect.
Yeah, as you mentioned, it's been over a year. The last international play was the Invitational last February in 2020. And we haven't seen anything since. So there could be some absolute legends coming out of APAC, coming out of the South American divisions that just go on a tear that we haven't really been seeing much on, especially some of the teams in these other regions. They haven't been able to play against either them themselves or other teams from the region to get a lock on their play style. So it's going to be a very interesting invitational to be sure. And I can't wait to see how all of these teams manage to fight each other out and figure out who is the best team from the best region.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And I think Apex even got a little bit of mystique because I don't believe, I know Giants, their roster made it as hysterics, I think, to a couple of events. So they're not exactly new. Other teams have played them before, but I think the way the Giants and Cloud9 are playing in APAC, and I think both these rosters being kind of switched up and fresh, they have some gunners, and they could look to take this best of one by storm and maybe sneak past some teams that you didn't expect them to get past. But this is about TSM. Obviously, we expect top four finish from them. They've proven that they could be a top team in NA, and I think they have the skill, the potential, and the gunners to continue moving forward. But we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. This has been the first ever episode for Road to SI. Next week is not going to be an NA team. It's going to be from another region. So that way, if you're watching this and you're a fan and you're enjoying the content that was put out, we're going to hit every region and not just stick on one. It should be extremely interesting. Like and subscribe. It's been Wet Nude with my co-host Neon, and we look forward to seeing you at episode 2 of Road to SI. And then they their revenge, and then they there got revenge against Oxygen with a 2-1 win to solidify. So you could think of a cool word like solidify, but then put then they there.